Hi, it's Michelle Budd, and this is the last of the four-part series on the faces of the 2019 Prime Minister candidates for the Canadian federal election that is coming up in October, in this month. And so today we are going to talk about the last candidate of the big four, and that is Andrew Scheer. He is the Progressive Conservative Party leader, and this is his face. Now, when we look at him, let's go where we've been going for the last three. We're looking at the eyes first. And if we take a look at his face, what we see is that for the most part, his eyes are pretty evenly held open. His left eye is slightly more closed, but it's not even so much more closed as it is, the shape is slightly different. So whereas the right eye is more rounded, this one is a little bit more curved. So in terms of shape, that just may mean that he is a little bit more of someone who can be influenced by others in his personal life, so a little bit more warmth there than in his public life, a little bit more business in his public life. But in general, very, very open-hearted, open communicator across the board, more so than any of the other three candidates, open to listening and open to sharing. So in terms of especially public trusting and trustworthiness, his eyes have the potential to indicate that of all three, he might be the most or more open of the four. And again, when we're talking about faces and personality, we're talking about potential. We're talking about what the canvas of the face says from terms of features and markings and wrinkles. And, this is all dependent on how in or out of balance someone may be and what their life experience impacts have been on their face. So if we're looking at this in the blank canvas that we've been looking at all four, Andrew's face in terms of his eyes show the most openness of all of the four. In terms of his eyebrows, they are straight for the most part. And so again, a more logical thinker, slight curve, so may have some people-centeredness in terms of his decision-making strategy. But what's really interesting here is that he has this very wide space between his eyebrows, wider than any of the other four candidates, if you can see that. And so what that indicates is someone who has the ability to work with many different groups, people, personalities. So able to work in various scenarios with different personalities. And that could have the potential to be very useful in this kind of leadership position. In general, when we see his eyes, they're also very sparkly. So there is a warmth to him. We see the fullness in his face in general in this photo here, and the slight hint of dimples, just like Justin Trudeau. So very much a captivator type, charming and potentially very charismatic man. And the fullness in his face indicates some nurture in there as well. So some people-centered approach to the way he communicates and the way he does the world. Now, if we take a look at this photo here where he's a little bit more serious, we see the fullness, yes, but we also see a little bit of a smaller mouth compared to the rest of his face. So potentially not necessarily the person who, innately fully speaks the language of relationship. He may have to work a little bit more at taking care of others and showing that. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to him from that feeding people perspective in terms of feeding their mind, their soul, etc. But the fullness in the rest of his face might counteract that because there is some nurturing there in the way that he communicates. So some fleshiness in this upper cheek area. So despite the fact that he might not be as warm and compassionate with his words as Elizabeth may be, he does still have the ability to hold authority, be matter of fact, but also have some warmth in that matter of factness. These ears, someone who, like Justin Trudeau, kind of marches to the beat of his own drum, might have a little bit of a risk taker nature, and his very cutting in here, strong hairline, just like Jagmeet, indicates potentially someone who had a stricter upbringing and might have a little bit more of a rebellious nature to him in terms of wanting to prove himself to the world. Now, what's very interesting here, we see his jaw very clearly, unlike our inability to see that with Jagmeet's beard, but it's a very different jaw than that of Justin Trudeau's. So this is a jaw that tends to just fall or melt right into the neck. His chin tends to be a little bit more held back in his face, a little bit more receded in this photo. Let's take a look. Yes, even in that photo, a little bit more back. So this is very much someone who has a sage jaw and a sage nature to their personality in some respect. So this is a man who might have more wisdom innately than some of the others. Although we saw in Jagmeet that creativity, that intuition, this jaw is someone who has an intuition that can translate into wisdom. His chin a little bit more receded, so potentially someone who might have had to deal with some inability to speak up or some fear issues in his younger life, but now might be the person who fights for the underdog and really wants to exert their will to create a space of change and have those that might feel like they are the underdogs step up and have their place. His double chin here in facial intelligence really speaks to the ability of someone to see both sides of a situation. So when we see someone with a double chin, that is sometimes shows the potential to indicate someone who can look at both sides and weigh both sides and then form an opinion and a judgment on all of the sides of a situation rather than just one, choose one over the other without seeing the big picture and more than one of the issues. So that might very much be something that we are looking for in a leader if they have the ability to see both sides. The last thing that I would say about him is that these lines here on his forehead are very prominent, and we see them often when he speaks. And those are really indicative of some lessons that he learned in his early 20s. And so a lot of them are full. So this is someone who has wisdom, and the wisdom is showing on his face in terms of lessons learned and the ability to have that as part of his story. So that tells us that he's gone through some stuff and he's learned his lesson, and his face is telling us that. The other thing that's interesting to note is that he has a relatively very narrow bridge of the nose. So, and these nostrils that tend to flare and be very visible in most of the interactions that we see him in. We can see right here, right into his nostrils. Often we see that, and in contrast to the narrower bridge of the nose here again. So this is someone who expends more energy than they take in. So this is someone who really puts all of their effort into spending, and whether that is spending their energy, their time, their resources, and potentially not having a balance in taking things in. So energy, information, resources. So we might want to weigh what his face says in terms of how he takes things in and spends, and spending isn't just money, it's time, energy, resources, etc. And so there's a little bit of imbalance there that shows up in his face, and it may be that he's an overgiver with his time, energy, money, etc. But does that translate into the ability to, or the desire to do that for the country and not guard what's coming in? Or is that just the way he does himself and his efforts that he puts into the world? So that's what his face tells us. And so we have to look at what his messaging is in order to see if that messaging matches what his features say about him. So in general, this is a warm, wise, potentially able to speak up kind of person, yet there is this championing for the underdog that might work in his favor or might not, and his imbalance in how he takes information, energy, etc. in, and what he might be spending, there might not be balance there. And so that is something for us to look at in terms of who he is as a candidate for us, but also for his own potential self-care, just like we saw some potential self-care issues around the mouth of Elizabeth May. So that is the end of this series. I know this one is showing up on Friday, so this video is in lieu of the Face Life Friday, but I didn't want to break up the series and I wanted you to have the information of the top 4 all in a row, because the election is coming up in a few weeks. And please, by all means, let me know what you think. And again, remember, all of these things that are showing up on the faces are potentials. They're another tool for you to understand who this person might be as a human being, from their personality, their life experience, their habits, their emotional stance, perspective, to see if who they are presenting to us visually matches the words that they are saying to us auditorially and what they want us to believe. And so good luck, happy voting, and I will see you when I do this again. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.